All right, let's talk Detroit Lions. Of course, training camp has started for the Lions as they get ready to make another run at a potential Super Bowl title. They've got the roster in place. There's been a little bit of disconcerting news at one position, but I think it points to an actually bright spot in Detroit, especially if you read between the lines with what the Lions coaching staff is doing with one new addition in particular, which we'll get to in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Lions have opened training camp as any team does, whether it's right in the edge of training camp or the week or so before, with a lot of moves, a lot of decisions involving some injuries. We've seen some injuries already occur. We'll get into the latest reports, look at some recent moves the Lions have made, and that'll point to exactly what new Detroit Lion the coaching staff is really high on. So first, let's pull up two tweets here. This is courtesy of Jason B. Hishorn. The first tweet is, I'll just read from here for you guys. Lions defensive tackle Levi Onwuzurike has a torn ACL, according to head coach Dan Campbell. That's why the team placed him on the reserve PUP list, physically unable to perform list. Earlier this week, he'll miss the 2025 season, so blow up front there with the defensive line. Next tweet there, Taylor Decker and Aleem McNeil, again on the defensive line here with McNeil, will begin training camp on the active PUP list. Both can come off at any time, but those are very important players for the Lions. So with McNeil, they're just playing it safe, but he will not be a player early on. They'll activate him when they feel it's right, not going to rush. So what does this mean for the Detroit Lions, right? So, okay, you've got one guy down on the defensive line. You got another guy down for training camp, for part of the training camp, the first guy down for the entire season. With that in mind, you're going for a title, big opportunity for Detroit. You would expect the Lions over the past week or two to make a lot of deals just to add maybe camp bodies and add some veteran depth pieces on this defensive line. And if you go to their latest slate of transactions, courtesy of spottrack.com, you will notice, if you look on the screen there in front of you, no defensive line deals, right? They added Jabari Small, the running back, Tyson Russell, the corner, DiCaprio Boodle, another corner, Anthony Tyus was waived. They signed Tate Ratledge, and they waived Devad Wilson. So you can see, looking at the screen here, they haven't added any defensive line help. They look at the room they got, even with what I'm going to call an injury and a half here, and they've said, we like what we have. So when you take a step back and look at the Detroit Lions, it's very, very clear they like what they have when it comes to one rookie in particular, and that's Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle out of Ohio State. A lot of people looked at Williams when he was selected by the Detroit Lions, and they said, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a reach. Well, the Lions are looking smart now, especially when you consider the fit Detroit really figures to use them in. And let's go into our next screenshot here to highlight what I'm talking about. So this is one of the more interesting graphics from the 2024 Detroit Lions. This is their top 10 run defense grade performers for their defense, right? They were a pretty good run defending team across the board. They're a pretty good team across the board, but here are their top run defenders. And you go down this list, there's one thing you'll notice, right? I'm just going to start with the positions working from top to bottom. Safety, corner, linebacker, safety, linebacker, corner, linebacker, defensive lineman, but only 22 snaps, linebacker, and then Aiden Hutchinson at number 10 as an edge defender, of course. You'll notice they have no interior defensive lineman as one of their top 10 run defenders, a clear and obvious weakness for this Detroit Lions team during their 2024 campaign, which they were great pretty much everywhere. But even guys like McNeil, they're much more pass rush oriented. That's where you enter Tyleik Williams. And finally, let's pull up our final graphic here just to bring it all home, looking at where Williams fits in as a prospect. You can see as a pass rush, those two numbers on the left there, pass rush grade, true pass rush set grade, or true pass set, pass rush grade. You can see average to below average in both of those metrics. This is courtesy of PFF. What they did here at PFF is they broke it up into like quartiles. So you can see the 4 squares in each column. So you can see the pass rush grade a little below half in that second quartile. True pass set, pass rush grade, right middle of the mark, right there in between the second and third quartile. And you can go to pass rush win rate, again, kind of similar mark there, a little bit past the halfway point, third quartile. But when you get the run defense grade, all the way at the far right, fourth quartile, 99th percentile, absolutely crushing it. And run stop rate, 7.8% right there in the bottom part of your screen. Fourth quartile, well above average. So you can see, piecing this all together, the Lions clearly believe what Tyleik Williams showed in college in terms of being a great run defender and being that a clear need for Detroit, like we showed on the previous graphic, that they think he is ready to perform day one. If they didn't, they would have gone out and signed a veteran defensive lineman. They would have brought in another rookie. They would have brought somebody into camp just to get another body in there. It's very clear and very obvious that they believe Williams is ready to play. They believe he's going to be an exceptional talent and fill this critical need for Detroit. Otherwise, they'd have gone out and signed someone. That's what happens every season this time of year. A veteran goes down, even if it's only for a few weeks or if it's for a full season. What do teams do? We got to go in and sign another veteran. We got to bring somebody into camp. We got to get some help. The Lions have not done that. There are no indications that they will do that. What does it mean? That Dan Campbell, this Lions coaching staff, they believe Tyleik Williams is going to be a day one star as a run defender up front in this defense. All right, Miles, I know I threw a lot of graphics at you there. I know you had to go through a lot of stuff, so big thanks to you for doing that. But before we get your thoughts on this, I know you've got a few ideas. Lions fans, you first in the comment section below. We're talking defensive tackles here. So my question for you guys, who, your opinion, is the greatest defensive tackle in Detroit Lions history? There's one guy that's recently retired that may be at the top of the list, but only can pick one. Maybe it's him, maybe it's somebody else. Give us the greatest defensive tackle in Lions history and put them in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure you check the description box for a link to our weekly newsletter courtesy of the Substack platform. Look, it's 100% free. It doesn't cost you anything. We're not asking for money here. We're just want to give you guys the option to sign up for our free weekly newsletter to get extra content, throw a lot of extra stuff in there to get you ready for the season, get you through training camp. So make sure you check it out. Link in the description box below. But Mize, enough from me. Everyone knows that at this point. What are your thoughts on this latest from Detroit?
Yeah, Nick, I think Tyleik Williams, when you look at him, like you said, the fit, people might say, oh, maybe a tad bit of a reach, but when you're at the end of the first round, I don't really think there are any reaches. I think you try to get the best person available because the end of the first round is a tricky place to draft for any team. But I think Tyleik Williams, when you look at how he fits to this Detroit team, he's a perfect fit, not a reach whatsoever. I think he really fills in quite well. And that run defense option, a great run defender in the middle of the field, is going to be a very good role for him because we look at the interior of this defensive line. It's what it was supposed to be at the beginning of the season when you look at Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader as the guys in the interior of the defensive line. This is where I think it's really interesting. And when you look at how Tyleik Williams stacks up in a way that, you can compare college to NFL, it's really not quite, comparable. But nonetheless, Aleem McNeil, a guy who last year played about 15 games. He did really good. He was okay in run defense. He's 64 and a half run defense grade. And, stops, he was decent. He had about 17 stops last year. In 15 games, 17 stops. That's the important part. That's all you need to remember. Now let's go to DJ Reader, another guy, really solid player. But last year, run defense grade, he was okay, 62.6 run defense grade. This is a guy who played significantly more games, about 18 games for a Reader. In those games, 14 stops, 18-14. So we got that. Now, let's look at Tyleik Williams, a guy who played 13 games last year. In those games, this is a guy who had 23 stops in those games as far as plays made by the defender that are a failure or a loss stop for the offense. This is a guy who can get in there and get high production, a lot of stops at the line of scrimmage. I really like that about Tyleik Williams, is this is a guy not afraid to get his nose in there, stop the running back, blow the play up. He can help. Now, if you want this guy to get sacks, not necessarily where he shines. He got 3 sacks last year, not bad, but this is a guy that really can plug the holes, stop the run, and is evident by his run defense grade. Elite, 88.6, doing really great stuff. And he did against really great teams. You look at the Oregon Ducks, he had 87.5 run defense grade there. Just really a guy that shows up when he needs to, does really great stuff. And I think overall, you look at this fit for the Lions, this is a great fit. A great run defender, a productive run defender, a guy who can fill a position need. And I think the proof's in the pudding when you said this is a guy who they had the opportunity to go out and say, hey, let's just bring some camp bodies in. Let's bring some guys in just to test the waters, see what's going on. No, that's not the case. They already think this guy can fill the role that he needs to fill. So if I'm a Lions fan, I'm feeling good about Tyleik Williams. I think he's the right pick that they have made. And I think this team is going to look really, really good down the stretch. We all know injuries are a bear. It's tough to deal with. But this Lions team, I think they've learned in the past. Last year, the injuries were tough for them, but they've grown. They've gotten the depth. And now an injury strikes this year, you're already ready. You have Tyleik Williams waiting in the wings to fill that gap. Once again, something he's really good at doing. So great by Lions. I think this is a good pickup, and I think we're going to see a lot of Tyleek Williams this season.
And you brought up a great point just to end on in terms of the stops, because we threw a lot of numbers at you guys today. I threw a bunch of graphics at you guys. But if we just take it from sort of a first principles, high level perspective, the Detroit Lions defensively are structured to get after the quarterback with guys like Aiden Hutchinson, of course, and they're super talented in the secondary across the board, and especially with the additions this offseason. That's really the strengths of their defense, the secondary and guys like Aiden Hutchinson pass rushing off the edge. How can teams counteract that? If you run the ball down the Lions' throat for 4, 5, 6 yards of carry, you get to 2nd and 5, you get to 2nd and 3, things like that. How do you prevent that from happening? Having a guy in the middle of defense that gets those stops, that turns that 1st and 10 to 2nd and 10. Now your pass rushers can get after it. Now your secondary can make some plays. That, in terms of not getting those stops, was a potential weakness for the Lions as we get ready for 2025. Tyleek Williams is a guy who can come in day one and turn that weakness into a strength, get Aiden Hutchinson and these pass rushers on the field getting after the quarterback, get this great secondary making plays. That's how this Lions defense is structured, and I think Tyleek Williams is perfectly suited to help that. And listen, the Lions coaching staff, like we said before, actions speak louder than words. They trust Williams, and again, there hasn't been pads on yet. All they're looking at this point is what he's doing in the weight room, and I think what he's doing in the film room and with his individual coach learning the defense, what he's done through this entire offseason, I guarantee you he's impressed them up to this point, because if there were concerns mentally picking up the game or concerns about work ethic or whatever, they would have gone out and added somebody. They didn't. That means they trust Williams. And if I tell you what, if there's a guy to trust in this world when it comes to knowing players and knowing football guys, it's Dan Campbell. If Dan Campbell trusts Tyleek Williams, we all should too. I'm expecting big things out of this young defensive tackle very early for the Detroit Lions.